Okay.
Hello and welcome to Enter the Tainment with your host, Kid, and this is Anne Kadet, who is the host of the lovely and wondrous Café Anne.
Hello. Okay.
Hello. Anne is a good friend of mine who's willing to do this, so that's wonderful. And do you want to just pitch your project?
Café Anne, thank you for asking, is a Substack newsletter. It's based in New York City, mainly because that's where I live in Brooklyn. And if I lived somewhere else, it would be based there. But basically, it's about a lot of interesting people I meet around the city and funny things that I see. And it's like no politics, no controversy, no fighting. It's just about having fun. And I pretty much write about whatever I'm curious about or interested in. So some interesting characters I've written about lately have been Don Montes, the city's first and only pet ambulance driver.
Okay.
I just did the issue that just came out now has a quiz where you get to go through the drugstore with me and guess ahead of time which items are behind lock and keys so you can't get at them. And it's really weird, like why are some of these things behind the plexiglass and some of them aren't? And also in this issue, I tried making NyQuil chicken.
Yeah, that terrified me.
Yeah, that didn't go well.
And you know what else didn't go well? I did very poorly on your test.
Did you?
Yes.
Did you figure out any ideas about why some of these things are behind the glass?
Well, it's funny, you'd suggested it ahead of time.
Yeah.
That might have been the Tide Pods issue. But I think that you were pretty astute as to what would make it on the black market.
Right.
And, you don't put the wine behind bars because the winos are just not they'll revolt, they'll turn over your store. So you've also done Meat Boy.
I forgot about Meat Boy, but I actually wrote about Meat Boy who kind of sacrificed his whole life to help his parents' butcher shop in Chinatown. But that was actually, I wrote that for another publication.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, but I wonder if I should go back and see what's going on with Meat Boy, because the business almost went out of business a couple months ago. He was doing a fundraiser. Yeah.
I didn't know that because I knew that it developed some speed and traction online.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Meat Boy went semi-viral.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So you're capturing a very shifting landscape out in New York. Can I mention your previous publication?
Yes.
Okay. So that was through Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. I went from the Wall Street Journal to having a blog.
Yeah.
As people do.
Yeah, well, it's fitting in the time that you're covering. Yeah, and so I was thinking about how you write. I was thinking about two things. I was thinking what my buddy Nathan Rogers Hancock says about Moby Dick, which is that it takes for granted that you care about the world.
Yes. Right.
That's sort of the Café Anne vibe.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, nothing in my newsletter will help you. It won't help.
Yeah. No redemptive qualities.
There's no news you can use.
Yeah. Okay, that should be the slogan there. And then it's another funny thing I was thinking of, which is there's a line in The Elements of Style that says, the thou shalt nots or whatever, do not adopt a breezy air. And I think the reason it works for you is because it's not adopted.
Oh.
I think that's just how you think.
Elements of Style says that?
Yeah, do not adopt a breezy air.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. But I think you pull it off because it's not an adoption. It's just part and parcel.
Okay, so it's okay to have a breezy air, you just can't adopt it.
Yeah, I don't think you're saying, well, chums, it's another fine day in Chicago, the Windy City. Like, that's just who you are. But I do want to ask, because we were talking and messaging
Yeah.
about how you feel about the topics of psychological growth and spirituality and such, and you mentioned
Yeah.
that you don't think they're very interesting to write about.
No, they're not interesting to write about, because they're difficult to write about.
Hmm.
I have trouble even talking about those things in an intelligent and comprehensible way. And one of the difficulties is, you notice that there's not really a shared vocabulary between any two groups of people. So if I'm talking about blah, 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 and people are like, what the hell are you talking about? And they probably have maybe the same set of beliefs, but I sound completely crackers to them because I'm using different words. So that's one reason. And a lot of like spiritual writers, they have their own special vocabulary, right?
Mhm.
And either they spend a lot of time like explaining what their words mean, which is tiresome, or they don't, which is baffling. So I never wanted to write about art or music because they're also very hard to write about in an interesting way, because you can't really talk about the thing using words. I always love to write about business because you can completely capture the nature of a business using words, and you can write about it in an insightful and funny way because the concepts are not so beyond kind of like everyday experience that it's difficult to write about. But things like religion, music are really hard to write about without, I don't know, I just don't want to work that hard.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'd assume you read a fair bit of those things.
Oh, I do. And I've learned a lot about how to think and teach and communicate from using those books. And there's some people who I really admire the way they've managed to sort of like cut through,
Yeah.
and really get to the point without using a lot of nonsense vocabulary. And those people are geniuses,
Yeah.
right? And that's why their books like last forever.
So I'm thinking about the Frank Zappa line. It's talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Good for him. I don't like his music, but good for him.
Understandable. But
He's
can you talk about why?
He's so messy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Speaking of architecture, I'll make my Anne Randian segue.
Okay.
Because I was talking to a socialist friend of mine. We bat heads a fair bit,
Yeah.
and she was busting my chops saying, "Oh, you think everything can be monetized or something?" And it's actually no, I don't.
Mhm.
I think that which can be monetized, it can be monetized, but like there's a whole realm that you can't really touch.
Okay.
The language, at least the English language, is very good
Yeah.
at talking about what can be monetized.
Mm.
And it
Mm.
doesn't
Oh,
seem
that's
to be
very
exceptional.
interesting. You're right.
It doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
exceptional at talking about the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe it's there. I mean, I'm pretty capitalistic, but I believe that it's there. I just don't like, what do you do with it? You don't trade
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
buy and sell it. So what am I supposed to say?
Yeah. Someone pointed out to me, I read somewhere, and I guess this is very obvious, but like the more simple and concrete what's being referred to, the object, like the shorter the word is. So there's like dog and cat, right? They're like 3 letters each. And then as you get to more complicated concepts and topics, the words literally get longer and longer and longer.
Well,
right?
this idea was vocalized at one point by a man that I monosyllabically referred to as Pim, which is a name stolen from, it's what Anne Frank calls her father.
Okay.
We name him Pim. But I use Pim to mean Mr. Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Also done a piece on.
Yes. Do you
So
want
to
me
speak.
to talk about that? But first, I want to hear why you talk about Mr. Jordan Peterson as Pim.
Because of that monosyllable problem. Like it's really hard because he says like you don't really have a concept. You don't really know what to do something until you have this name for it, like cat, or you nickname somebody kid.
Yeah.
Then you don't really have, there's still like,
They don't exist before they have names. That's why Adam and Eve had to go around naming everything.
right. And so the name like Jordan Peterson is like,
Yeah.
and you did a whole piece on how people have all these associations for the 50 people had associations of what the name meant without really knowing who that was. They just knew how they were supposed to feel about him. Does that sound like an accurate portrayal of
the survey I did? Yeah. So just to catch everyone else up, I did a little survey where I went around New York City and I said, who is Jordan Peterson? I was very curious because on a recent podcast, he had said that he has trouble getting down the street now without like, he didn't really say he was mobbed, but like he was recognized so often and he felt so compelled to be sweet and kind to everybody that it was difficult sometimes, you know? And I'm like, is he really that famous? You know, that he can't, you know, walk down the street without being harangued. And so I went around and I asked 50 New Yorkers, who is Jordan Peterson? 71% had never heard of him, but 30% actually thought they had heard of him. Like they could at least take a guess. One person said he was a serial killer, which is not correct.
as far as we know.
As far as we know. But what was really interesting is many people that who didn't know who he was, not only knew who he was, but it was almost like I'd interrupted them in the middle of like some reverie about him, right? Like it was just like they had been thinking about him when I happened to stop by because they had had so many thoughts built up about him. You know, he just evokes a lot of reactions in people. He's a very kind of like large person, you know?
Yeah.
And I like that about him. He's so interesting that people, all different kinds of people have all different kinds of reactions that he provokes.
And I'm not sure if this is what your piece was about, but what I made it about.
Yeah, okay.
Which is like I Googled neoliberalism today.
All right.
And I knew that whatever the hell it is, I'm not allowed to like it, right? Like I know that much. But I'm like,
I don't know what neoliberalism is.
Well, that's because it's too many syllables to have an opinion about.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on my rant, but it's extremely biased. But my point is that it's like, you know, and actually there are a few people who talk about that, which is, I think it's the conversation between Africa Brooke and Brittany King, although I could be getting people mixed up, but they're like, they didn't know who he was, but they knew they weren't allowed to like him.
Yeah.
But he kept getting recommended by people who they kind of trusted. So they're like, well, what's the story?
Right.
And, you know, I always think of my teacher. He watched the movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is Michael Parada in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And he said he watched the whole thing like this, like, I'm not going to laugh and I'm not going to like it, you know? Yeah. And I had that experience with Peterson originally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
don't know who this guy is.
About like by what you came in on, because if my first experience of him had been, you know, what he's been doing lately, I'd be like, no.
I don't even know what he's doing. Fair. So how do we get to this? We were talking about monosyllables.
Right. And he said something about monosyllables?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned somebody did, and I'm like, well, he's talked about that too.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh.
Good
and
talk.
Just pinning something to that little idea. Will you tell me what this quote is behind you? Because I can't tell that I'm understanding the grammar correctly.
Oh, I love this quote. Let's see. What does it say? Okay to relax. Problem is inside you. Hey, where'd you go? There you go. My little brother's friend in Queens, or he lives in Greenpoint. I wish I could say his name and give him a shout out. But he's an artist, and this is actually a painting. And my brother asked him, like, hey, what's up with you know, the series that you're doing? Because all the paintings are very similar to this one. And he was just like, I just got really into hand lettering. So I think I'm not sure if like he's all that interested in the message, but I saw this, and if you can't see, where it says, okay to relax, problem is inside you. And then overhead, there's a painting of a ship getting like just busted up in pieces by a giant wave.
The other thing Mr. Prada said was he
Yeah.
wouldn't let us wear print on screen or on stage because he said people will just read it over and over again.
Oh,
So I was
really?
sitting here reading this thing going, okay, you got to tell me what
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
So
Anyway, that's my whole life philosophy. You calm down and your problems disappear.
right. So
Really
the,
weird.
and the breezy attitude
Ah,
is not a put on.
no.
Yeah,
I don't think it is.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
my experience
yeah,
of you.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so these topics, I mean, I know you've talked about wanting to write about them in the future. Does that seem like it's still an interest of yours? And does that seem like an interest that's outside of Cafe Anne?
You know, no, I don't. Yeah, I used to think that I wanted to write these kind of like books about kind of marrying recovery and recovery processes with Buddhism and other kinds of various psychological insights and Carl Jung. And I'm like, does that sound like fun? And I'm like, no, that does not sound like fun. If it ever does, if I can figure out a fun way to do it, then I would do it. And I don't mean like, oh, I'm going to make a graphic novel. I mean,
Speaking to
but
the guy who
generally,
wants to
if
make a
I could
graphic
like
novel.
find some new way to talk about these things that would be fun, I would do it. But right now, it doesn't seem like a thing, you know?
Yeah. So what goes back to, we talked about your rules for writing something at some
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
which were like, what do you want to see and what would you actually enjoy making or what would be fun to make?
right.
And I think that has some mileage. I tried to write novels and I'm just talking about the same thing for years, which is apparently what novel writers do. But my brain doesn't work like that. My brain is like a mile a minute new story idea that my poor therapist has to hear every week
Right.
because I have that many stories. And so I don't think the novel is a good fit for me.
Was that hard for you to admit?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I studied screenwriting and that's not real.
Hmm.
And I'm a songwriter and that's not real. And
Yeah.
we'll make a graphic novel or something. It's like, and that's purely because there's no end to that. Then it's
Right.
like I'm writing a novel, but it's a sci-fi novel. I wrote a sci-fi novel, and it's like, well, that's not real, right? It has to be literary fiction, and so it gets really, yeah.
I just totally stopped listening to you because I realized I hit record.
Okay.
And was this supposed to be for video too?
I think it covers it, but we'll find out.
Oh, no, just because with the screen, I have you very large and then me like really tiny. So I didn't know if it's for video, maybe we should be the same.
I don't know if it matters,
Okay,
but maybe.
I'll just put us both. There we go. Okay, just in case.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, a buddy was talking to me, and he was just saying, my friend Greg, who runs the Occult of Personality podcast,
Yeah.
I was talking to him about my experience writing screenplays versus novels, and he's like, I spent too much time doing things I thought I was supposed to. And that doesn't have to be one's experience
Yeah.
writing a novel. But like, there's a reason people don't write novels, and there's a reason why, I think the statistic was every 1 in 3 people in LA has a screenplay they're trying to pitch.
Okay. Yeah.
Fundraising.
I wrote a novel. And then last year around this time, I started a second novel. And yeah, I had that experience. I'm like, wow, I hate this.
Yeah, and this is why.
Yeah.
But this is why I turn to you for advice so often, because I think at one point you told me you wrote a novel.
Yeah.
You wrote a screenplay. No, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, a symphony.
Yeah.
But you didn't write a novel and a symphony at the same time.
No, did you try to do that?
It sounds like the kind of stupid thing I do. I would know better than write a symphony.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty for someone with the lack of follow through, I'm pretty extremely ambitious.
Yeah.
So those aren't great forms for me.
Yeah. I think I was able to make myself write a novel because I can make myself do just about anything. I don't know if you're the same way, but
Fairly.
yeah, I don't want to do that anymore.
Do you
The
like
results are very good anyway, you know?
what'd you say?
The results of making yourself do something aren't very good.
That was my next question, which is
Yeah.
is your novel any good?
Well, you know, I went back and read it like last year, and the parts that I thought were so great were horrible. And then the parts that I thought were like horrible were pretty great. It was funny. I'm glad that nobody wanted to publish it because it
Yeah.
was quite mean about some people in my real life.
Oh,
And I would never do that now, you know?
yeah.
So I was kind of saved by the gods of publishing.
Yeah, so a buddy of mine, Ben Shields, had just read a piece of mine, and he basically accused me of overwriting, which is a really friendly criticism,
Mhm.
because it basically is telling somebody that they're fine the way they write and think, and it's not working when they're trying.
Oh, yeah. You don't need to push.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which just goes back to your rule: don't push, don't pull.
yeah, that's
Which
such a
seems to
great
be,
rule. Yeah,
yeah. Tell
thank
me
you
about
for
that
reminding
rule.
me of that. Don't push, don't pull. Yeah, so pushing is forcing something to happen, right? That's not happening by itself. Or mostly it's pushing yourself if you're someone like me or you. Other people push other people around.
Yeah, or is that pull?
And then pulling is, for me, no, pulling is just like something wants to like leave or go away, and you're like, no, and you're like trying to like, you know,
Yeah,
rope it back in. And anytime you feel that like weird tension of like, you know, you're like pushing or like pulling, like just stop.
right. So, well, interpersonally, it seems like we
Yeah.
push ourselves closer to people, and we attempt to pull them closer to us. So we push ourselves to be like other people, and we pull other people to conform to us.
Well, that's interesting. I guess I would think about it the opposite way, but same thing.
Yeah, I mean, right? We say you're
Yeah.
being pushy.
Yeah.
I haven't never been accused of this. Yeah, yeah. But in terms of writing,
Yeah.
right? It's interesting because kind of you kind of have a piece in your mind that you can't it can't happen in your like it can't come down to earth and remain in its like platonic ideal state,
Oh,
and then you kind of have to go
yeah.
through the loss of what the piece was going to be when it was in the
Interesting.
dream state. At
Yeah.
least this is my experience, because when my idea is vague, it's
Yeah.
like, and then it's really hard to give all your characters like specific names and specific jobs
Huh.
and all these things, because in your brain it was this crystalline ideal,
Yeah.
you know. But that's for us who like have trouble finishing things.
Mhm.
It's because it's so much better in this vague amorphous dreamland.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's like okay, so I have these harmonicals, right?
Yeah.
I have a set of 3 in different keys, and I have a set of 7.
Mhm.
And I ordered them online.
Yeah.
I think I told you this because when I ordered them online, my idea of what I'd be like as a harmonica player, like I was the greatest harmonica player since Blues Travelers 4 came out,
Uh-huh.
and then they got here, which was terrible because I'm a shitty harmonica player.
Right.
But in my ideal, it was all these things. And
Yeah.
that's what it kind of is like. That's part of the difficulty of writing, is that you sacrifice like that's a PIM idea too, is like you sacrifice this like abstract ideal,
Mm.
actually engaging with a person, place, or thing.
That's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sucks.
I have to say, like, one difference for me, maybe I haven't thought about it in the way you said it, but like my novels are amazing. Right? And they don't exist. Like the actual novel I write is a lot like my everyday column writing, you know? It's kind of like funny and quick and ordinary, and there might be some funny insights in there, but that's about it, you know? It's not the work of genius. It's just, it might be amusing, right? It might be a little amusing and a little insightful. Done, right?
Yeah.
And for some reason, when I write nonfiction, I'm like, that's great. That's wonderful. Good job, Anne. But novels are hard because in my mind, the novel I've written has, a masterpiece for all the ages, which I would never expect from my everyday writing.
Yeah, it's also a novel, so we don't really expect that from a film, because the novels is like there's 3 of them.
3 good novels.
Yeah, there's there's not a lot of them, And if you didn't write that, like, sorry.
I'm just thinking like, okay, how many good novelists are there? 5.
Okay, cool. We got the answer for that.
5.
The next question.
I mean, really great, right? And then there's like tier 2. There's maybe, I don't know, 50, 100, right?
Okay. I'm following you generally.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, so let's say as a novelist, I might be a tier 5 or 6 or 7, right? Maybe an 8, tier 8. Is there tier 8? Anyone?
Sure, okay.
And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. But I'm totally fine writing. Oh, here's what it is. Writing everyday bloggy stuff is the payoff is so immediate. I put it out there. People read it that day. I get lots of comments. I get weird emails back. Stuff goes around online. It's just very gratifying, on a day-to-day basis. Like my life on a day-to-day basis is more fun when I'm doing that kind of writing. When I'm working on a novel, my life is less fun. So yeah, like for the blogging, the writing and the putting it out there is fun, with the novel writing. I guess some people enjoy writing novels, but I'll have to say, I know many people who are novelists and they're like, every day. It's like opening up my chest, right? And pulling out my heart.
Right. That was the Hemingway line. Was what does he say? Writing is easy. All you have to do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they must like that. What do you think?
I think they like it, but it's hard because the image of what a novel is so ingrained into us that you can just like suits. You can really like a nice suit.
Yeah.
But the idea of what a suit means in terms of wealth and prestige is really tied into what a suit is.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that it's hard if you're trying to legitimize yourself as a writer.
Yeah.
In your own imagination.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
Novel has certain connotations to it that are really extreme. And it's hard.
Yeah. I want to say this about newsletters and blogs.
Yeah.
There's kind of a notion or idea of what they are. And like, unlike the novel, the standard is super low, right? You're like, oh, I have a blog or a newsletter, and I was like, oh, it must be shit.
And yours is
definitely gonna be amateur hour. So there's that. So like if you do like an okay job, you're like, 1 in 1,000. And another thing about blog or newsletter is that we kind of have an idea of what they're supposed to be, but it's still pretty new. It's still 20 years old, right? So I really can do whatever I want. And I feel I feel so much freedom with my Café Anne newsletter blog. I really can do whatever I want. I don't even have like a lot of I don't have preconceived ideas in my own head, let alone having to worry about what preconceived ideas other people might have, right? That's the thing about being in a relatively new format. Even if you said you were writing essays, you're still kind of stuck. Right?
Well, essays more so because we all had to write essays for years, and it was not a fun activity.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to be,
and essays should be super fun.
What?
Essays should be really fun.
They should be, but I think all those have, and so Cesar Ira is, I think one of the top 5 living writers that we talked about. Cesar Ira. Visual aid coming up.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry. He's got these pretty little books, so I had to. I have enough of these that you can tell I like him and a girl I likes him. But Cesar Ira only writes novellas because he thinks he thinks the novel's done.
Will you spell it for everyone, please?
Yeah. C-E-S-A-R, last name A-I-R-A. Cesar Ira.
Never heard of
It's
him.
novellas.
Okay.
He won't let himself write more than an hour a day. But he says it adds up.
It does add up.
Yeah.
What does he do the rest of the day, do you suppose?
I don't know.
Huh.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he only writes in public. And he always steals things that people say for dialogue.
Yeah.
He's a weird man. But
He's really that good?
I like him.
Huh.
Well, I don't know if he's that good. I don't know that there's that many good writers now, as we already determined. There were and after you count you and me, I mean, it's getting a little slim there. But you know, for like Herman Melville,
yeah,
they found, like, it was years ago that they found a copy of one of his books in the New York Library with uncut pages because no one had opened it. And he died in obscurity.
mm-hmm.
And so, you know, he wrote the great American novel, and he didn't know that.
Right.
So he was just one of the struggling schmucks we know who's trying to piece together their novel and figure out if it makes sense.
I think when I was younger, I would have been like, that's great. You know, like after I'm dead, people will really like me. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
Okay, so, but back to the free form of this medium, yours is kind of even more so, because oftentimes, like, there'll be 3 things happening in an article of Café Anne, and it's almost like a mini newspaper or something. I mean, pretty mini.
Yeah, starting to think about it more like kind of a zine, right? Mm-hmm. Where people will just like throw whatever shit they wanted into the issue, like whatever happened to like be on the plate, just to like sort of sweep it into the trash and hand someone the bag. That's not a good analogy, but yeah, I really want it to be fun. And one trend I see in newsletters a lot, and I hope this doesn't happen, and I think it already is happening, is that people are like, oh my God, I don't have an editor anymore, right? And it's like magic, like their articles get longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. You're like, wow, this would have been fun to read about for 10 minutes, but 40 minutes? I don't know. You know, like there's a lot of books out there, you know, that would have made very fine magazine articles.
Well, that takes us back to the novel, because a lot of these were, as far as I understand, and I'm no historian of this by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of them were published in journals, or they were published in print and serialized. Yeah. And then, you know, over time they developed in this way with a public audience. Yeah. And I think it's just different to sit down and think you have that much to say. One
cool thing about the newsletter is that if it's too long, like Gmail will literally like clip it off, right? And then if I know that I have to it's not going to be like one long essay, then I'm going to try to like have 3 things in there. Nothing can be that long, and that's really good discipline for me too, right? I really do worry about becoming that person who's just so in love with their own thoughts and language that they think everyone will have the patience to read whatever I write. And you know what? Sometimes I've already read my own newsletter. I'm like, wow, I'm bored. I don't want that to happen. And it's very tempting, especially when you have no one telling you what to do.
I found them pretty short and to the point. Does the name mean, because it's kind of like I'll pour my cup of coffee and I'll read Café Anne. Yeah. Is that what the name means?
I chose Café Anne because it seemed like a ridiculous name, you know, it's so self-referential. Like, why would anyone read anything called Cafe Anne? It doesn't mean anything. Like, I'm so important that I can name it after myself. So I thought that was funny, you
Uh-huh.
know. And then I like coffee a lot. I do love cafes, and I wanted the newsletter to feel like a very open place where anyone could come and hang out, you know. And I think like the comments section reflects that, because there's a lot of people commenting, and they seem pretty like free to say whatever nonsense they want, and it's never mean. It's like a nice friendly cafe, you know.
Yeah, so I'll use that to give the plug. Cafe Anne. It's a great simple read if you can't make it down to the cafe in these what's the phrase? Uncertain times. The poet I study under makes fun of this phrase because, like, when were there certain times?
That's a good point. Right?
But how could somebody find or subscribe to?
Yeah. I think if you just Googled Cafe Anne, that's probably the easiest way to do it. I also have a Substack address, which I have to look up because I'm out of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. It's my name, Anne Kadet, ANNEKADET .substack.com. And then you can subscribe for free. It is free. It's free.
Thank you, Anne. But I don't want to let you go yet. I have so many questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so for now, you're just waiting to see if, in terms of writing on these other subjects,
Right.
because you teach on one of these subjects.
I do. I teach meditation at my local meditation center.
Mhm.
It's a Buddhist meditation center. So yeah.
Is teaching different for you in terms of writing, in terms of enjoyment, fun?
Well, in my tradition, I'm really there, even though I'm a volunteer teacher, I'm there to transmit the tradition, right?
Right.
I'm not there to talk about my opinions, my views. And certainly I'm encouraged to be myself, because people want to hear the Dharma or the teachings from a person who has made them, who has really lived them, you know? It is
And
not
they've
just like,
gone,
yeah, right. So it needs to be coming from a real person who has done as best they could to eat the teachings up and make them a part of yourself, right?
yeah,
So
so
they're coming from your own experience and not from having read a book about it, right? That said, so I can be myself, but I have to be very careful not to mix in my own weird spiritual adventures into the mix, because that's not why I'm at the meditation center. I'm at the meditation center to transmit a very particular lineage. If people want to talk to me out on the street, then they can get Anne stuff, right? But so it's not quite as fun as the spouting off, you know?
but is it something you're sparing your audience of because they didn't volunteer?
What do you mean?
I'll put it to you this way. I made a joke with somebody today.
Yeah.
I said there's 3 things that no one should be subjected to hear about:
Okay.
veganism,
Oh, yes.
Buddhism,
Uh-huh.
and crypto.
What's the last one?
Crypto.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you don't want to have to be cornered and told about vegetarianism or Bitcoin. You know, it's just not proper form.
I have some friends and they're very indulgent with me, and I try not to talk about Buddhism with anybody unless they're like as crazy about it as I am, you know. But sometimes I'll be like, hey, Natty, hey Aharon, hey Kelly, is it okay if we talk about Buddhism?
well,
They'll indulge me, right? But I know they're just like being nice.
yeah, I would recommend anyone listening to this channel to check out Cafe Anne and to not go on a first date with me, because these are what you'll hear about. It makes me think of something that you said that I've quoted you on before. And it's personal, I hope it's okay. Which is, you said, I'm the worst, and I identify with this. I'm the worst person. I'm the worst version of myself in front of my teacher. because it's like you want to bring together all your best qualities,
Yeah.
but they're just your idea of your best qualities because you want to look good. I don't know. I'm using the general you. I know it sounds like I'm saying you.
You know what? I have a different teacher now, and we have a
Okay.
different relationship. Yeah. And I don't think I'm quite as awful around.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay, so it's an interesting idea of these different audiences, you know, because
Yeah.
right now I'm trying to do this where I'm just like everything will just go in here and it'll just be everything in the kitchen sink.
Okay.
And I just know if somebody wants to deal with me, they'll just have to deal with it because
Yeah.
I'm not, as like I said, like you just don't go on a date with me. Like it's just not a, you know, because I'm not very good at creating those sections, you know, but you've also developed this audience through, you know, working at Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if anyone followed me over. I think like maybe like 2 or 3 people who read my Wall Street Journal column are reading Café Anne,
Well,
which
power
is
to them.
fine.
Okay, well, I'll let you go, but this was thoroughly enjoyable.
It was.
Um, anything else you want to plug? All your novels, symphonies?
No, thank you.
Great. Tune in next time to hear about Buddhism, veganism, and the crypto market.
Yeah, let's do a podcast where we only talk about those 3 things.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, bye, Anne.
Bye.